It's a story we've been following closely, the future of the Eastfield Mall property and what might fill that space. Good Monday evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on Western Mass News at 10. I'm Chris Pisano. Earlier tonight, Springfield City Councilors met with the developers to discuss the latest on that project. And Western Mass News reporter Maria Wilson is live with more from their meeting. Maria.
Chris, about a half an hour ago, the Springfield City Councilors approved the developer's special permit for the districting of the mixed-use retail and commercial hub. City councilors heard from Onyx Springfield Crossing, the new owners of the Eastfield Mall property, who say that the space offers a unique opportunity, something former Springfield Mayor Mary Hurley agrees with.
This is a no-brainer that gives this city a fresh breath of air. This is something that's going to put us back on the map.
City councilors weighed in and raised their concerns on a number of issues, including diversity, equity, and funding. Onyx representatives responded to city councilors' concerns about the future of the tenants.
Our main objectives were to, one, relocate, to really deploy a relocation effort, two, secure funding. So that's a lot of conversations that we've been having with a number of stakeholders, etc. And I will mention there, and then three, with the goal of retention through all of these aspects, and that translates into technical assistance.
The developers have been working closely with the current tenants and have waived rent for those businesses until the mall closes in July. Onyx is also helping the current tenants with relocation process. Some of Monday's attendees say that the space will be used for a mixed-use hub, which will include fast casual restaurants and about 20 retail stores, including possible residential housing. The project expects to bring in about 800 jobs to the city, according to one of the project's engineers. Proponents of the development say they are eager to see added business and jobs come to the area. Many of the specific details about the project, like which stores and restaurants we could see in that space, aren't available at this time, but developers say that they will make those announcements as soon as possible. Reporting live in studio, Maria Wilson, Western Mass News.